evaluation, and the trophy that got away is the humorous speech category. So watch out for those who are planning to go for that, because I just might make a comeback. So this evening, my talk is really just to how we could spice up our speeches with humor. This is not about the humorous speech contest, because the humorous speech contest comes far in between. But every day, every moment, we deliver speeches. We might be asked to deliver a eulogy, we might be asked to do a technical presentation, and we need to spice it up with humor. So this is the gist of my talk. Why should we use humor? Why should we include humor in our speeches? Say if it's a eulogy, why do we need to add humor? If it's a heavy topic, why should we add humor? Because our audience might get so engrossed and so deep into it, they will need to come up for air in between. So humor will be able to break that. So you allow the audience to breathe once in a while throughout your talk. If you're doing technical presentations, if you're just going to use all numbers, you might end up looking at an audience that's all sleepy. So you have to keep them awake by introducing humor. But the humor that we add should be congruent with our topic, with what we are saying. It's not just like we just say a joke at the start and that is it. It's not effective. People might laugh, but it has nothing to do with your talk. So it has to come in between our talks. And we draw from our own personal stories and experiences. There will be 4 points that I would like to discuss with you this evening. First will be self-deprecation. Second will be using of dialogues. Third will be being spontaneous, being quick, being flexible. Because we are trying to pick out stories, remember. Then the last one would be triads. We know about triads when we write our speeches, 3 points. So we could use this also in making our humor stick into our speeches. Now let us start. If we want to do humor, let us start. So I'd like to ask a question. What is rectangular, has flowers, and is totally crazy? I mean, totally scary. I see people going, ooh. Could be anything, right? Could be a lot of things. So let us find out. It's rectangular, it has flowers, and it's totally scary. And that's me in the picture. Okay? Self-deprecation is an important tool in adding humor. Because if we try to make fun of others, we might alienate half of the audience. Especially nowadays, we have to be quite careful. There are so many areas wherein we are quite tentative in moving and talking about. So the best way to add humor is when we talk about ourselves, when we make fun of ourselves. That will prevent any incidents happening wherein you would have to apologize after the talk. And it has happened in the highest level of those masters. So self-deprecation would be better. So like when we say, I showed the picture of this, we should be able to share things about ourselves that we don't usually share with people. We should be comfortable with that and use that as a tool to add humor into our speech. It's like when I talk about my weight and my size, I say, you're calling me fat? I have curves, but they are going in the wrong way. So it's about myself. I'm talking about that, my size, but I'm making fun of myself. And then you trigger. So when we talk about humor, it doesn't have to be a roll on the floor type of laughing. It's something that will just trigger a reaction from the audience. Maybe a start of a smile, and they start listening because they are going to expect something else from your speech. So you try to include this at the start of your speech. It's like when I delivered my speech, Lord, give me a lover. I started with, when are you going to get married? Asked my mom. For her, it was an unforgivable sin for a Chinese woman to have a daughter my age that is still single. So you start a small rumble from the audience. Doesn't have to be what I've said, a roll on the floor type of laughter. Because this is not a humorous speech contest. We are just adding a little bit of humor in our speeches. So think of something. Think of how you could use that. It's like when we talk about, there's a way of practicing this. Maybe we could just start with our face or our body. You could do that exercise yourselves, and if you think of something during this meeting, you can type it on the chat box. It's like when we talk about, let's say, my face. I start with, they say I have a very attractive face. My chinky eyes will often twinkle. My lips will curve up in a smile, and my nose is so flat an airplane can land on me. So you see, you're talking about yourself. You're making use of the tools that you have. Okay, another thing that we could use, dialogues. When we look at a photo, at a picture, oftentimes we say, why is it so much better when I was standing in front of that scenery? How come the picture doesn't match what I see? Because the picture is flat, it's one-dimensional. In Toastmasters, when we deliver a speech, if we add dialogues, it adds dimension, it adds character. So try to have an exchange of dialogue between you and another person. I was talking to...
PID Elisa, you were muted.
Okay. So use dialogues because dialogues will help give dimensions to what we're saying. And usually you give the punchline to the other character. Why give it to the other character? If you're talking about something serious, you don't want to put something like, let's say, funny on you because you're the speaker. You would rather give that punchline to the other character. Like, for example, I caught this from somewhere. It's not something that happened to me, but I would like to share it with you. There's this guy who was so frustrated about his work, about him not being able to get a job. So he was talking to his friend Peter. And he said, Peter, I'm so frustrated. I cannot find work. I have applied in 20 companies and I still do not have work. I can't seem to find anything. And Peter would say, don't forget, you have a girlfriend that you can't let go of. So what could I do? I'm so frustrated. I need a job. And Peter said, go read a book. And I said, read a book? Peter said, yes, go read a book. Something that will help you grow and become better. And I said,
Ikaw na kasi, may bibili na
that's
po.
the reason why I tried to graduate right away, because I don't want to read books anymore. And Peter said, that's why you have to read books when nobody else is reading. So I asked Peter, now which book should I read? Where do I go? Where's the bookstore? And Peter would say, how would I know? I don't read books. So you add characters, and the punchline should be given by the other person. That makes it more effective. It's not simply an exchange of he said, she said things. It adds life. It adds dimension to our speech, our talk. Okay, let's go to the next one. Be spontaneous, be quick thinking, be flexible. Sometimes we have a speech already prepared. It's like when I have a keynote, everything is ready. Everything is prepared because I have practiced it already. I know the timing and all those things. But there are times we have to be spontaneous because we might pick up something along the way that we could incorporate into our speech. I would like to share with you a story. This happened when I was in Kota Kinabalu, District 87. They had their annual conference, and I was there on an official visit as international director. So I was supposed to give the keynote. It was prepared, I was ready with it. And then the night before, there was a grand gala night, they call it. And it was like a welcoming night for all of the delegates. And they had people dancing, their traditional dances, their sports, their singing. And in front of us was a jar, that big, the same as in the picture. And since I was at the presidential table, we each had our jars in front of us. And I was so curious about it. Why? Is that a souvenir? Is that food that we're going to eat? So I couldn't help myself. I took a peek. I opened the lid and I took a peek inside. And inside was rice grains. Fortunately for me, seated right beside me was the Minister of Tourism for Sabah. And we spent the next few hours and he was explaining things to me. And he explained this to me. He said, there is a bottle of water beside the jar. Open it and pour the water into the jar. Then get that straw, stick it all the way to the bottom of the jar and take a sip. Anybody would like to dare give a guess as to what I drank or what I sipped from the jar? Wine. It was a very strong rice wine they call papay in Sabah. And so, the following day, when I was going to give my keynote, the start was about me appreciating attending conventions because I always learn something new. About people, about meeting new friends, and I talk about words that we share the same meaning. And I said, but the most important thing I learned on this trip is that in Sabah, you don't eat rice with spoon. You use a straw. And they started laughing already about that. And I said, I also discovered this century-old mystery of how Jesus Christ was able to convert water into wine. And then they burst laughing. Because if I just used that I found about the rice, it would have been an ordinary addition to my speech. But when I talk about it being correlated to being a miracle of Jesus converting water to wine, they started laughing. And I made that connection. But this was not part of my speech. It came about last night when I had that jar in front of me. So, you have to be flexible. We have to be spontaneous. We have to see and we have to get energy from the audience. Sometimes if I pick up on something, I would like to add another line or two to that story. So we have to be aware of our audience. We have to look at it that way. Okay? Then, triads. Earlier, I gave you an example of a triad. I said, chinky eyes that are twinkling, lips that would curve up in a smile, and a nose so flat that a plane could land on it. So the first 2 points were normal. Things that we would expect. Eyes would twinkle, lips would curve up in a smile. When I hit the third one, the nose, that's where the twist came in. It was so flat, a plane could land on it. So we're using triads. If you watch the speech of Lance Miller, the world champion, he effectively used triads. He talked about, I am 24 years old, I have a job I do not like, I have not dated in 3 years, and I live with 2 roommates named Mom and Dad. And the third was the twist. Instead of just saying, I still live with my parents, he came up with that. And it was a triad. And the third one was the twist, Mom and Dad. So those are effective ways of using triads to incorporate humor into our speech. Every time we give something humorous or try to incorporate the humorous line, we have to start with something believable, something that is true, and then twist it. Because that would be the most effective way of using humor. Now, we don't have to find jokes and buy countless books that will have jokes in it to incorporate into our speeches. Use our stories, use our own personal stories, and add the twist. Find ways where you could twist those stories, because then that would make it more effective. Another example of a triad. This was one of my lines that I use in my speech. I said, when I was 18, I said, love can wait. The world is there before me to explore. When I was 25, I said, I still want to pursue my career. I want to achieve the best. Love can wait. Today, I look up at the Lord and said, when, Lord? And God said, I have run out of miracles. So I'm talking about me being single, but I use it to place humor in the speech. So I don't need to try to find lines in joke books, but rather we should try to use our own stories that we already have, and add the twist. What we need to work on is finding the twist at the end, because that will certainly bring out the humorous lines. Another thing, I tried to lose weight by doing the no carbohydrates diet. I did intermittent fasting. Nothing worked until I started running after that guy, and running after that guy over there, and running after him. So the first 2 are truth, and the third one will be the twist. So fellow Toastmasters, we have 4 areas that we could work on. Self-deprecation, using dialogues, being spontaneous, being flexible, quick on the uptake, and using triads. We could use any of this. We could try to mix it up. But we have to practice our pause. We have to practice our timing, because it will not work if we just go very smooth. So we need all the inflections and the fluctuations to make it work. So take the time, use it, look at your stories. I'm sure we all have stories that we could tell, and find twists that you could add to your speeches. Thank you, and thank you, Manu, for the invitation. Thank you.